Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at the logs and get an overview of how the logs work on Sim. So as you can see, we have a basic workflow with a start block and an agent block. The agent is instructed to write a poem. So what we'll go ahead and do is we'll run this workflow manually. So as you can see here on the bottom, we have our console. So this gives us, an immediate insight into the logs. So for every single block that's executed in the workflow, we have an input as well as an output. So this is an easy way to see, where the logs run on your page manually. Now, if you're not running a workflow manually, you're not actually going to be able to see the execution and the logs on this canvas. Where you'll be able to see this is in the logs page. So if you click on the logs page here in the bottom left, we have all of the workflow executions, their timestamp, the date, the status, so whether or not the workflow succeeded or failed. We have the workflow name, we have the cost, the trigger type. So in this case, there's going to be a manual trigger, a schedule trigger, an API trigger, or an integration trigger, as well as the duration. So we can actually click into every single log and get a detailed breakdown of the trace spans. So for example, here we can see at the top the timestamp workflow execution ID. We can actually see a snapshot of that workflow. So at this time, here's what the workflow looked like. And so we can actually get the inputs and the outputs of every block here. So users like yourself can easily take a look at what's going on behind the scenes. Additionally, at the bottom, we have some metadata, so a cost breakdown. We have the base execution. We have what it costs to query that model. We have the model output, and so we have the total as well as the tokens. So this is a very detailed, trace span that we can access with. We also have the ability to go down using this arrow button, so we can go down all the logs and get a quick, change into the new logs that we want to, sift through. We can also filter the logs by status. We can filter workflows. So in this case, I only have one workflow. We can filter by folder. I don't have any folders. We can filter by trigger type. So as I mentioned before, there's a few different ways to trigger workflows: manual, API, schedule, chat, and webhook. We can filter by time. And so there's tons of different ways to kind of dig into the workflow. So there's also this search bar. So if you wanted to search for a specific workflow very easily, you can just type in, the status, the cost. If you wanted to select cost, you can say over 1 cent, under, half a cent, et cetera, et cetera. So if I do over 1 cent, we have a few here. And so this is just kind of an easy way to filter. We also can export the logs as a CSV file. So if I wanted to export the logs here, I can go ahead and do that. We have a live version. So if you wanted to kind of monitor this logs page, you can select live. And so every execution will show up here as it's completed. And finally, we have the dashboard. So we can see all of our workflows, the successes, the failures. We can see the runs, the latency, all in sort of a more visual kind of interface where we can get a nice overview. And additionally, we can filter as well on this overview. And so that's just a little bit into the logs page. One last thing that I would like to mention is in any workflow execution, you can configure notifications to actually report some sort of failures if you wanted to, or anytime a workflow execution happens and you want to receive some sort of a notification via webhook, email, or Slack, you can do that easily within this modal here. So you can select all workflows, or you can select a specific workflow, and you can give it a webhook URL if you're configuring it with webhook. In this case, let's do email. So I'll select, Jade Planet, which is the only workflow we have. We can enter the recipients to receive these notifications. So I'll enter myself. We can actually enter the log filter levels. So there are all levels, but if we wanted the logs to only get reported to us on failure, we can select just error. So every time a log errors, I want to send an email to myself. We can select the trigger type. So for example, if I only wanted, you know, workflow executions that failed via API, I can select API. We can include, specific information in the payload. So I only want to see, for example, the final output of the workflow. I can select final output. We can give it a rule. So we can say, okay, for example, if there's consecutive failures, we want to report this log. So we can select consecutive failures. And let's say if the workflow fails, 5 times in a row, I'll select 5 here. Oops. If the workflow fails 5 times in a row, then I want to notify myself like this. So we'll click create. Okay, so now I have this active notification to email me on 5 consecutive failures. So I can go ahead and test this. I can edit it. I can delete it. So this is super powerful when you want, immediate insight into, your workflow executions, just so you can make sure that everything is running smoothly. All right. Thanks so much.